By this time I hope the reader that is not wholly blind may see the vanity of this argument from tradition. Catholic tradition is pretended at Rome for the Pope's supremacy and infallibility. This tradition, with others, comes to them by uninterrupted succession from the apostles, wherein by the argument I have now in consideration, it was impossible for the bishops and or governors of the Church either to misunderstand the mind of their ancestors or wittingly to deceive their posterity. That which they make impossible to be done, the instance proposed discovers to be certainly done, it being impossible that the fathers should make a decree if they had not either been ignorant of such a tradition, as Bellarmine chargeth them, or wilfully maliciously opposed to it, as the Pope accuseth them. And forasmuch as these fathers pleaded a tradition directly contrary to that which the Romanists pretended, that is, that there should be no appeals to Rome, it irresistibly follows that that tradition hath deceived either them formerly or the Papists at this day. I shall dismiss this answer with a remark upon the whole matter, that if the Pope or Popish faction durst for their own base and ambitious designs use such palpable forgery in a time of so much light, when they had so many diligent observers and potent opposers, I leave to the prudent reader to imagine what forgeries might be expected from them in after ages, in times of ignorance and carelessness, when all the world was in a deep sleep, and the Pope only vigilant to improve all occasions to his advantage, and had almost all princes and people in the Christian world at his devotion. And thus much may serve for the seventh answer, wherein I have been the more prolix, because it strikes at the root of the argument, and not only proves the possibility of deceit in traditions, but also discovers the ways and modes by which mistakes may be committed and falsehoods introduced under pretense of tradition. I will add but one thing more. Section 24, answer 8th, and last. If the tradition pretended give us infallible assurance that the doctrines of the present Church of Rome are come from the doctrines when the Romish Church holdeth no doctrines, such as they have received from the apostles, but the Romish Church holdeth many doctrines which she hath not received from the apostles. This I might take for granted, having already proved it in that fundamental tradition of the Church of Rome concerning the Pope's supremacy. I might refer the reader to what I have reported out of diverse Popish authors of greatest note concerning their acknowledgments of their departing from the doctrines and practices of the Fathers. And having said so much there, I shall content myself with mentioning two particulars. The first shall be that which hath been more largely discussed in chapter 3, whither I refer the reader, about the Blessed Virgin's conception in original sin. The present doctrine of the Romish Church, or at least of the far greatest part and most eminent members of it, is for her immaculate conception, as I showed before from the decrees of popes and universities, etc., and innumerable of their most approved authors. How much this opinion was favored by the Council of Trent sufficiently appears from their decree about original sin, though cunningly and doubtfully delivered, as the devil's oracles used to be. In which decree they declare that they would not comprehend the Blessed Virgin, the sense of which decree, according to that favorable gloss which Mr. White puts upon it, was this, that the council did judge both opinions probable. Now, from the business thus stated, I gather two undeniable arguments to prove the fallibility of tradition. First, tradition told the ancient fathers that one of those opinions was positively false, that is, that the Blessed Virgin was not conceived in sin. Tradition told the Council of Trent that either of these opinions was probably true, which is an implicit contradiction. Secondly, seeing in this hot contest not yet ended between the different factions of the Romanists in this point, both sides pretend tradition for their contrary opinions, and both agree in this to hold nothing but what they have by tradition. Therefore tradition must needs have deceived one of them, ergo it was not infallible. To which I shall add that the doctrine which the most and learnedest of them hold, that is, of immaculate conception, was not received by tradition from the Fathers, as I have showed from the ingenuous confessions of their most learned writers, to which I may add those words of Melchior Canis, that the Blessed Virgin was wholly free from original sin, cannot be proved out of Scripture, according to its genuine meaning. But that is but a small matter to give the Scripture a go by, Let us see what he saith of the golden rule of tradition. Therefore he adds presently, nor can it be said that it came into the church by apostolical tradition, for those traditions could not come to our hands by any other than those bishops and holy authors which succeeded the apostles. But it is evident that those ancient writers did not receive it from their ancestors, for then they would have faithfully delivered it to their posterity. And yet, if Mr. White's discourse be solid, in spite of your eyes you shall believe, not only that no doctrine is delivered by the Church of Rome which hath not been conveyed to their hands from fathers to children, even from the apostles' days, but that it was impossible any other doctrine should creep in. The other instance is that of the canon of the Scripture imposed upon us by the Church of Rome, which they say is another apostolical tradition, and yet their own prime authors confess the most ancient fathers to be on our side, at least as to several of their apocryphal books. Sixtus Senensis gives them to us in general. The ancient fathers hold the converted books to be non-canonical. Bellarmine gives us Epiphanius, Hilary, Ruffinius, and Hiram. Canis gives us Origen, Damascene, Athanasius, and Melito, a famous and ancient father who flourished in on year 170, and was a man of great judgment and venerable sanctity, saith Sixtus Senensis, who purposely traveled to the eastern churches, where the apostles had their principal residence and employment, to learn about the true canon, and brings a non est inventus for the apocryphal books, and returns with the very same canon which we own, so that in him we have the testimonies of all flourishing and apostolical churches, to which Tertullian directs us for the discovery of the truth. Nor to this day have the papists cited one father or council within the compass of 600, I think I may say 1,000 years, who did receive their whole canon, and consequently none of them, for aught appears in their writings, knew anything of this pretended tradition, but, as it seems by the story, when the image of Diana dropped down from heaven, she brought this tradition along with her. The like might be showed in sundry other particulars. In the celibacy of priests, which is solely de jure humano, not divine, by the confession of Thomas, Durandus, Lombardus, and Scotus, 4 principal pillars of the papal church, and Turianus was noted by Cassander as the only man of all, both old and late writers of the popish party who maintain the just divinum of it. But if it were an apostolical tradition, it was de jure divino, and the Council of Nicaea would never have dispensed with a divine injunction. So in the worshipping of images, transubstantiation, purgatory, and many other considerable points, wherein I need say nothing, because it hath been so fully cleared by diverse learned Protestant writers, particularly by Jewel, Usher, in his answer to the Jesuits' challenge, Mullins, Novelty of Popery, Alias in several places, Reynolds, De Libris Apocryphus, Whitaker, Chalmer, and innumerable others, but Manum de Tabula. This, I hope, may suffice for the refutation of this novel invention concerning the infallibility of tradition and the testimony of the present Church, where I have been more large, because it is a late plea, and less hath been said of it by Protestant authors, and so it remains unshaken, that a Papist's faith hath no solid foundation in oral tradition, and the present Church's authority, which was the business of this proposition.